Welcome to another episode of Food and Cooking 101, and today we're going to be making one of my favorite pasta dishes of all time, penne alla vodka. And vodka sauce is one of the easiest sauces to make. It only has a couple of ingredients: tomatoes, cream, vodka, crushed red chili flakes, and salt. And we're also going to go over a little bit of the history of this dish and how it gained its popularity. So with that, we've got a lot of work to do, so what do you say we get to it? So like I mentioned in the intro, penne alla vodka truly is one of the easiest pasta dishes to make. And while it is usually associated with penne pasta, honestly, use whatever pasta you have and it's gonna taste great. And as far as tomatoes are concerned, the first option you have here would be whole tomatoes. And a lot of people just take a can of these and puree it together and use that for the sauce base. You could also mash these up with a potato masher if you like a more coarse consistency. And if you really like a chunky consistency, maybe use diced tomatoes. Or if you like the consistency to be completely smooth, tomato sauce and tomato puree are good options. And honestly, I prefer using tomato puree over tomato sauce, and that's because tomato sauce usually has additional ingredients like extra herbs, spices, and other flavorings added to it in addition to the tomatoes. And not that that's necessarily a bad thing, in fact it can be a good thing because it's a more ready to use ingredient. I just prefer having more control over these flavorings myself, but for you at home, I would say give both of them a shot and see which one you like more. And next up we've got vodka. And as far as vodka goes, I wouldn't go too cheap because obviously that stuff tastes like shit, nor would I go too expensive because there's no reason to spend a bunch of money on this. Honestly, get a bottle anywhere in the $15 to $20 range and it's gonna be great for this. And next up we've got cream. And this is just regular heavy whipping cream, and this is what lightens up the color of the sauce and turns it from red to orange. I see a lot of people calling the color of the sauce pink, which drives me crazy. It's not pink, it's orange. And this also adds a lot of richness to the sauce. And lastly today we've got some crushed red chili flake. And a lot of people like to use quite a bit of this stuff because they like the dish spicy. And I would say even if you don't necessarily like spicy foods, I would still add a little bit of this anyway. And that's because a small amount of this stuff isn't going to overpower the whole sauce and make the entire thing spicy, but it is going to add some extra complexity to the dish. Okay, to make the sauce, start with a sauce pot and place it on a burner over medium heat, and to that add a small amount of olive oil along with 1 diced shallot and 2 minced garlic cloves. Give that a stir, and I'm also going to add a few dashes of chili flakes right now to lightly toast them with the aromatics. And like I mentioned a few moments ago, you can add as much or as little as you like. And after 2 to 3 minutes of softening up the garlic and shallots, we can work in 1 can of diced tomatoes and 1 can of tomato puree. I use these because I think the best versions of vodka sauce are the ones that are a combination of a smooth and chunky sauce. Some people also like to add a small amount of tomato paste here as well because it can add a stronger, more tomatoey flavor to the sauce, and if that's for you, by all means go for it. But the sauce is still going to cook down and reduce a little bit and inevitably concentrate either way. Okay, with the tomatoes in the pot now, we're ready to add the vodka, but rather than measuring out an exact amount every time, I usually just fill up these cans until they're 1/3 of the way full. And with this, you can also swirl it around a little bit and clean up the remnants that are remaining in the can. So with that, these are ready to go into the pot, so in we go. Okay, with the vodka in the pot now, toss in a few pinches of salt and stir the whole thing up, and you'll notice that the sauce is very thin and runny at this point, so it needs to cook down for 15 minutes or so to thicken up and cook out any harsh alcohol flavor within the vodka. And I recommend doing this on a very low setting simply because tomato sauces really like to splatter and create messes. And after roughly 15 minutes, my sauce is a tad bit thicker but still slightly on the liquidy side, so I'll let this go for a few more minutes. And in the meantime, let's hop over to the other burner and with the pot of water, set the heat to high and drop in a few pinches of salt. And during this time of moving around and resetting the light and camera positions, the sauce has had a chance to thicken up a little bit more, so I can drop in 3 ounces of heavy cream and stir that into the pot. One mistake I notice a lot of people making with vodka sauces out there is too much cream being added. When it comes to cream in the sauce, less is more because it can quickly drown out everything else in the sauce. And when you get everything mixed in, give it a taste for seasoning and make any adjustments as needed. And with the sauce finished up now, the pot on the other burner is boiling now, so we can drop in our pasta. So penne alla vodka has somewhat of a contested origin story, with multiple people taking claim to have invented this dish. and the oldest origin story that I could come across was from a Midtown Manhattan restaurant named Fontina de Trevi. This was a restaurant that opened in the 1950s, and the chef there, Armando May, claims to have put this dish on his menu in 1957. And a cool little fact about this restaurant, it served as an inspiration for the Billy Joel song Scenes from an Italian Restaurant. And another New York-based origin story comes from a chef named Luigi Francese, who worked at a restaurant called Orsini. And his daughter claims that he invented this dish by adding vodka to a tomato sauce in the 1970s, although he called it pasta alla Russia. There are also a few Italian-based origin stories as well, one of them being from Dante Cesari, who owned Dante's Club in Bologna, Italy. And in the 1970s, supposedly a cook there named Marco added vodka to a tomato sauce, and thus penne alla vodka was born. Now, the first printed version of penne alla vodka came in a 1974 cookbook written by an Italian actor named Ugo Tognazzi. Now, I did try locating this book in local libraries around me, but none of the libraries here in Kansas City happen to have it, so I wasn't able to find the book. And another potential Italian origin story comes from this William Sonoma book, Essentials of Italian Cooking. And the story here is that a Roman chef came up with the recipe basically to sell more vodka. But it doesn't give the chef's name, it doesn't give a restaurant's name, it doesn't give a brand of vodka, it really doesn't give anything at all. And that's very strange because generally William Sonoma cookbooks are really good cookbooks with thorough information, but they kind of dropped the ball on this one. Okay, jumping back into it, the pasta is done cooking, but before straining it out, I like to catch a little bit of the cooking water first. And this starchy water is going to be added to the sauce, and it's going to help the pasta cling to the sauce a little bit better. So with the pasta ready to go now, let's jump back over to the stovetop, and with a saute pan set between medium and high, drop a few tablespoons of the reserved pasta water into the pan along with a few ladles of the sauce. And as that heats up, unload some of the pasta into the pan as well. And when making pasta dishes like penne alla vodka, I don't really measure out specific amounts when putting it together. Just know that the pasta is going to absorb the sauce as it heats up, so starting with a bit more sauce than pasta isn't a bad idea. And if the sauce does get a bit too thick, you can always thin it back out with a little bit of the cooking water along with the sauce itself. And when everything reaches the right consistency, if you happen to have some fresh herbs lying around like some basil or perhaps some parsley like I have here, go ahead and toss them in the last minute or so. And while I'm at it, I'm also going to add a little bit of Parmesan cheese right now as well, because Parmesan cheese pretty much makes everything better, so why the hell not? And with that, this thing's done, so we can head over to the other side of the kitchen and get this whole thing plated up. And the plating on this one is really simple. Just unload everything onto a plate or bowl or whatever you choose to use. Then you can garnish it with some extra parsley, basil, or even more Parmesan cheese if that's your thing. But with that, we've reached the end of the video, so as always, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.